You can judge me if you want, but please, sit with me for a minute. I know what I did sounds wrong, and I don't expect forgiveness or even understanding. All I ask is that you hear my story, because behind every mistake lies a tangled, raw truth. Mine began the day Mr. Callahan, my best friend's own father, stepped into my life and flipped everything upside down. I wasn't searching for love, nor was I ever really hungry for attention. I was just drifting, wrapped up in the safe routines of being the good girl. But then, there he was. In one blink, in one look that pierced through my carefully built walls, he made me feel seen. I remember that moment so clearly. The soft murmur of a conversation in a quiet room, the almost imperceptible creak of the wooden kitchen chair beneath me as I shifted, and the gentle clink of wine being poured into my glass. It all seemed to slow down, like I was living in a movie where every detail mattered. I felt a spark, a dangerous, exhilarating spark, igniting something in the dark corners of my heart that I'd long forgotten. It was as though, for the first time in years, someone looked right at me, really looked at me, and saw every hidden layer beneath the mask of the obedient daughter, the ever-present best friend. In that fleeting glance, I realized I was more than the sum of my fears and past disappointments. For one brief, shining moment, I was alive. And then, just as unexpectedly as it had all begun, a heartbreaking truth set in. I was betraying everything I thought defined me. I never imagined I'd ever feel so conflicted, torn between a longing I could hardly comprehend and the guilt of betraying those I once held dear. I never thought I'd betray her or myself. Yet, here I am, entangled in a web of choices that I can't unsee, feelings that won't fade, and consequences that echo in every quiet moment. So here I am, inviting you to walk with me down this painful, yet strangely beautiful path. A path that started with a glance and led to something neither of us could have ever predicted, a journey of seduction, regret, and the haunting question of whether the price of being truly seen was worth the cost. Let me share with you every breath, every stolen moment, every silent tear, in a story that's as raw as it is forbidden. It was early June, sunny, sticky, and loud in that way only a backyard barbecue can be. Laughter echoed across the Callahan's massive lawn, the smell of grilled ribs and sunscreen hanging heavy in the warm air. Kids splashed in the pool. Grown-ups clustered around folding tables, gossiping over plastic cups of rose. And I sat quietly on a faded blue lawn chair near the edge of the hedges, nursing a bottle of sparkling water like it might anchor me to the earth. I had just moved in with Maya, my childhood best friend, for the summer. She'd offered me the spare room in her family's guest house while I took summer classes and, frankly, tried to recover from a breakup that had drained me of more than just love. 3 years together, and it ended with a text message and silence. You don't walk away from something like that unscarred. You carry it with you in your posture, your eyes, your smile that doesn't quite reach your cheeks. I was 24 and felt like a ghost inside my own skin. I wasn't trying to meet anyone. I wasn't trying to feel anything at all. And then I saw him. He stepped out onto the patio like he belonged to the sunlight. Crisp linen shirt, sleeves rolled up, hair graying at the temples in a way that made him look even more striking. That was Mr. Callahan, Maya's father. I'd known him for years in passing, the successful real estate mogul, the composed, intimidating man who rarely smiled and always looked like he was on his way to something more important. But that day, something was different. He caught my eye across the yard, and not in the way grown-ups glance at their kids' friends. This was direct, unfiltered. It made my breath catch for a second too long. I looked away first. A few minutes later, I was fidgeting with the hem of my sundress when I heard his voice, low, smooth, confident. You don't like crowds, do you? I blinked, turned. He was standing beside me, holding out a glass of lemonade. I noticed you've been sitting here a while. Thought you might be thirsty. I took it. My fingers brushed his, just for a second. And God help me, it meant something. It was warm, unfamiliar, unnerving. like the flutter of a moth's wings inside my chest. I forced a polite smile. Thanks. He sat down in the chair next to mine, close, but not too close, and looked out over the yard like he wasn't watching me out of the corner of his eye. You're Isabel, right? Maya's friend from college. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. That's me. She's mentioned you. Smart. Focused. Quiet. He said it like it was a compliment. Like he saw something valuable in what the world usually dismissed as boring. I found myself relaxing a little. Talking. Laughing, even. I told him about my classes, my thesis on postmodern American literature. He listened, really listened. Not just nodding along, but asking questions. Thoughtful ones. The kind that make you feel like what you're saying actually matters. And then he said something I'll never forget. You speak like you're always editing yourself. Like you're afraid of being too much. My throat tightened. He saw that, too. We talked for almost 20 minutes before Maya came bouncing over, flipping her hair and rolling her eyes. Ugh, Dad, stop hogging Izzy. You know he loves showing off when pretty girls are around. I laughed. Nervously. But I didn't correct her. I didn't say, he was just being polite. Because a part of me, one I hadn't listened to in a long time, didn't want to deflect it. After that, the rest of the barbecue felt like a blur. I floated through conversations, half present, still turning over the way his voice dipped when he said my name, or the way his eyes lingered, not just on my body, but on my face. Like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone on the tiny patio outside the guest house. Crickets hummed. The air smelled like grass and leftover charcoal. I wrapped my arms around myself and whispered into the dark. What are you doing? Because deep down, I already knew something had begun. Something I couldn't name yet, something I wasn't ready to admit. And that was just the first day. The days after the barbecue were strange, in that quiet, crawling way where nothing big happens, but everything starts to shift. You can feel it in your skin before your mind catches up. I wasn't trying to see him. I swear I wasn't. But somehow, I kept running into Mr. Callahan. Daniel, as I later learned to call him in private. He was everywhere. The first time was in the kitchen, early morning. The sun had just begun to spill golden light across the marble counters. I had tiptoed in, still in my oversized sleep shirt, thinking I was alone. He was already there, pouring black coffee into a mug, sleeves rolled up, forearms lean and dusted with fine hair. He didn't flinch when he saw me. Just smiled that soft, unreadable smile. You're up early, he said, sliding a second mug toward me like it was the most natural thing in the world. I hesitated for half a second before taking it. My fingers wrapped around the ceramic, still warm from his hand. Couldn't sleep? I murmured. Same, he replied, his gaze holding mine just a second too long. Some mornings are too quiet, even for dreams. We didn't say much else. Just sipped our coffee in silence, watching the light shift over the garden through the kitchen window. And yet, somehow, it didn't feel like silence at all. Later that week, I found him in the library, this cozy, wood-paneled room at the back of the estate no one really used except him. I'd gone in searching for a quiet place to study, but ended up staying for hours. He was behind the desk, flipping through a leather-bound novel, glasses perched low on his nose. And when he looked up, when our eyes met, it felt like he'd been waiting for me. We talked. About everything. My thesis. His favorite authors. His childhood summers spent on the coast. How suffocating it feels to always be the responsible one. He asked me things no one ever asked. About my fears. My goals. The parts of my life I usually hide behind polite smiles. And in return, he opened windows into his own life. Quietly. Carefully. Like each truth was a piece of thread unraveling from a life sewn too tightly. My marriage, he said one afternoon, his voice low, is more of a partnership these days. We play the part, for Maya. For the family. But truthfully, I haven't felt like someone really saw me in years. I didn't know what to say. I just listened. And I think maybe that meant more to him than anything I could have said. Over time, I started to crave those conversations. Not in the way you crave attention or compliments. It was deeper. Like emotional oxygen after being underwater for too long. I began noticing things. Like how his eyes always found mine when I walked into a room. How his fingers would graze mine when passing me a book. One afternoon, we both reached down at the same time to pick up a journal that had slipped from the table in his study. Our hands brushed barely, but it was electric. Like touching the edge of something forbidden, something dangerous and thrilling and too warm to resist. I looked up. He was already watching me. Not with lust. Not yet. It was something more intimate than that. It was recognition. That's what was so terrifying. He didn't want me. He knew me. And yet, I caught myself smiling when I saw him, and hating myself for smiling. I'd lie awake at night in that guest house, turning everything over in my head. The way he laughed when I made a sarcastic comment. The way he tilted his head when I spoke, like I was the most fascinating person in the room. The way his voice softened only when we were alone. And I started dressing differently. Subtly. A little mascara. A dress instead of sweatpants. I told myself it was for me, but deep down I knew better. Then one night, just before leaving the library, he said something that made my stomach twist in the most confusing, beautiful way. "You know, Isabel," he said, not quite looking at me, "you have a way of making silence feel like a conversation." My breath hitched, and I didn't know how to answer. Because I was falling. Slowly, quietly, but undeniably. Into something I hadn't planned. Something I didn't even fully understand. And yet, I didn't stop it. I didn't want to. It was the kind of night that feels like it's holding its breath. Thick with summer air, hot, wet, and heavy. Even the sky seemed restless. Maya had gone into the city to meet up with some friends, left around 6, kissed my cheek, told me to help myself to anything in the kitchen. "My dad's probably locked in his office all night," she said. "He's been obsessing over some merger or deal or whatever." I nodded, smiled, pretended I wasn't secretly hoping I'd run into him. Like I hadn't spent all day pretending not to wonder where he was, what he was doing, if he'd noticed I was wearing that pale slip dress again, the one that brushed against my thighs just the right way when I walked. I was curled up in the lounge when it started, reading by the open window. One leg tucked under me, wine untouched on the table. The first rumble of thunder cracked across the sky, and the room flickered, the lights dimmed, then blinked out completely. For a second, everything was black. I could hear the wind rising outside, the heavy creak of old trees shifting in protest. Then, footsteps. Slow, steady, coming down the hallway. "Isabel?" His voice was calm, low. It wrapped around me like velvet. "Power's out," I said, too loudly, my voice bouncing against the walls. "Obviously." He chuckled gently. The sound of a lighter flicking. Then warm candlelight lit up his face. He stepped into the room, holding 2 tall candles in glass holders, one in each hand. "You okay?" he asked, setting one down on the coffee table, the other on the shelf near the couch. "Yeah, just didn't expect a storm. They creep up on you," he said, glancing toward the window where the trees were swaying violently. "Storms have a way of shaking loose things that have been too still." He turned to me then, fully. Candlelight casting soft shadows along the edges of his jaw. "Want company?" I nodded, wordlessly. And that's how it started. He left for a moment, came back with a bottle of red and 2 glasses. We didn't talk about anything important at first. Small things. His favorite wines. The book I'd been reading. The heat. The storm. But the air between us, it wasn't small. It was thick with everything we weren't saying. Lightning flashed again outside, and for a second, his features lit up sharp and clear, then plunged into warm darkness again. I could hear the wine being poured. A soft glug, the glass catching the dim flicker of flame. I took a sip. It tasted heavy. Dark berries and something old and expensive I didn't recognize. Then I said it. I don't know why. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the way the candlelight made everything feel like a secret. But I turned to him, my voice quiet and broken in ways I hadn't expected, and I said, I'm so tired of always being the good one. He didn't interrupt. Didn't nod politely or offer a quote or advice. He just watched me. So I kept going. Ever since I was little, it's like people expect me to be the calm one, the smart one, the girl who says no, who doesn't make a scene, who does the right thing every time. And I've gotten so good at playing the part, I don't even know who I am outside of it anymore. The silence that followed was the kind that hums in your ears. The kind that doesn't feel empty, just loaded. He leaned forward a little. You don't have to pretend anymore. 6 words. That's all it took. And something inside me, some brittle, exhausted piece of my soul, snapped. Not loudly. Not destructively. More like the soft sound of glass cracking under pressure. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. So gently. Like it wasn't even about the hair. His fingers brushed my cheek as they moved away. I looked at him. Really looked at him. His eyes weren't hungry. They weren't demanding. They were asking. And God help me, I leaned in. Just slightly. Just enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath against mine. Just enough to know how his lips would feel if they touched me. But I didn't move closer. And neither did he. The space between us was no more than a breath. But it was everything. I could hear the rain now, beating hard against the windows. And then I pulled away. Not because I didn't want it, but because I did. Too much. Too suddenly. Too deeply. I stood up fast. Almost knocked over the wine. My heart was pounding so loudly I thought he'd hear it echoing in the silence. I need to go. I should. I didn't finish the sentence. I just walked out, barefoot, shaking. I fled to my room, heart racing, hands trembling. I sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like hours, listening to the storm rage outside, candles still flickering behind my eyes, the heat of his nearness still clinging to my skin. And I knew in the marrow of my bones, the line had been crossed, even if we hadn't touched lips. He had touched something, and now there was no going back. The days that followed felt like walking on the edge of something sharp. Everything looked the same, Maya's laughter, the hum of the espresso machine in the mornings, the soft footsteps of the housekeeper down the hall. But I wasn't the same. I kept thinking back to that night, to the way the candlelight danced on his skin, to the words he said, you don't have to pretend anymore, like he had seen the version of me I didn't even know I was starving to become. I avoided him. Or tried to. I spent more time at the university library. Took longer showers. Left earbuds in with no music playing just to pretend I couldn't hear him walking past my room. But he was everywhere. The hallway. The courtyard. The kitchen. It was in the kitchen that everything changed. I was reaching for a mug, top shelf, my toes barely grazing the tiled floor, when he stepped in behind me. I hadn't heard him. I froze. His voice was soft. Let me. I turned. Before I could speak, he reached past me, and then his fingers grazed my wrist. Lightly. Almost apologetically. I should have pulled back. I didn't. Our eyes locked, and the air went still. So still I could hear the clink of the spoon in the sink behind us. The faint whir of the ceiling fan above. Then, he took a step closer. And I let him. He didn't ask. I didn't nod. But somehow we both knew. The kiss was soft. Tentative. Not desperate, not hungry. Just real. A quiet collapse into something neither of us could name yet. Like two people slowly leaning into the fire, knowing it will burn, but aching for the warmth. When our lips finally parted, I stepped back. Not out of regret. Out of terror. Because that was the moment I knew. This wasn't just attraction. This wasn't a passing mistake. This was something else. something that would change the shape of my world. And it did. After that kiss, everything became a lie. But also, everything came alive. We didn't plan the next time. It just happened. A rainy afternoon. Maya gone again. I wandered into his study with some books she'd borrowed. He was there alone. The door clicked softly shut behind me, and neither of us said a word. He looked tired. More human than usual. I feel like I've been sleepwalking through my own life, he said, his fingers brushing mine as he took the books. And then, you showed up. And suddenly, I was in his arms. Not in a rush. Not reckless. But like we were two people finally stepping into the space we'd been orbiting for weeks. It was like drowning in warm water. You don't notice you're suffocating until it's too late. And by then, you don't care. We became shadows. Ghosts in hallways. Secret glances across the dinner table. The brush of his hand against mine when no one was looking. The stolen moments in the early mornings before the sun had the courage to rise. There were times, brief, breathless times, when I thought I'd never felt more alive. When his touch made me feel like the woman I'd buried under years of being careful and quiet and good. But then, there were the other moments. When I'd catch Maya smiling at me over breakfast. Or when she'd say, "God, my dad seems less stressed lately. I think he really likes having you here." And I'd smile back, heart heavy like soaked fabric. Because every time we were together, it felt right. And every time we weren't, the guilt clawed at me. Not at the edges of my mind. I started avoiding mirrors. Because I didn't recognize the girl staring back. He told me things. Things I wasn't sure I should have heard. "We haven't touched in years," he once whispered, curled beside me in the shadows of his study. "We don't even speak unless it's about the house or the accounts. I don't think she even sees me anymore." I believed him. Or maybe I needed to believe him. Because if I didn't, what did that make me? Some nights, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, the scent of his cologne still on my skin. And I'd think about how easily you can fall. Not in one great dramatic tumble, but slowly, step by step, decision by decision. Just a little further each time until the ground you once stood on is nothing but a memory. I told myself it was temporary, that the feelings would pass. But they didn't. They grew. They tangled. They consumed. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I forgot how to be anything but his, even if I was never really his to begin with. I should have known it wouldn't stay secret forever. Nothing that intense ever does. It started with the little things. The way Maya's voice shifted when she spoke to me. Sharper. A little colder. The way she'd glance at me across the room like she was trying to solve a puzzle she didn't even know she was holding. One night, we were sitting by the pool, just the two of us. The air was thick with summer humidity. The kind of night where everything feels too quiet, too still. She turned to me suddenly, her wine glass dangling from her fingers. "You've changed," she said. No smile. No laugh. "You're always somewhere else. Are you okay?" I laughed. God, I laughed too quickly. Too high-pitched. And I said something stupid like, "Just tired, that's all." But I saw it in her eyes. The beginning of doubt. The slow unraveling of trust. And it killed me. Because if there's one person I never wanted to hurt, it was Maya. She was the friend who held my hand in high school when I thought I'd fail biology. The girl who slept on my dorm floor when my heart was broken for the first time. But I had already hurt her, even if she didn't know it yet. And then, there was her mother. Mrs. Callahan had always been polite, cordial, distant in that way women of a certain class sometimes are, like they're always watching but never blinking. But suddenly, her eyes were on me, lingering, assessing. She'd appear in doorways I didn't expect, ask questions that felt like they had answers hidden inside them. "Isabel, you've been spending a lot of time here lately. Are you planning to stay the whole summer? You're so quiet, always deep in thought." And I'd smile, pretend, lie, all while inside, my chest felt like it was caving in. And Mr. Callahan. He changed too. He became bolder, less cautious. Texts that came in late at night, just one word, awake. Notes tucked under books on the shelf. Quick touches on the small of my back when no one was watching. His hand brushing mine and passing longer than it should. And then, talk. Talk that scared me. Talk that made my heart race in the worst way. We could leave, you know. I'd take care of everything. I haven't felt this alive in years. I don't want to lose this. This. Like we were some beautiful secret instead of a storm waiting to break. He wanted me to imagine it, us, somewhere else. A house by the coast. Fresh starts. A life not tangled in lies and family and guilt. And for a second, I let myself imagine it too. The breeze on my skin. The quiet mornings. A version of me that didn't have to hide. But then I'd see Maya. Or hear Mrs. Callahan's heels clicking down the hall. And the dream would shatter like glass in my chest. I was in too deep. Too many lies. Too many chances to stop that I hadn't taken. I started pulling away. Not in big ways. Just inch by inch. Taking longer to reply to his messages. Excusing myself earlier from rooms where he was. Avoiding the study, the library, the kitchen. All the places where it used to feel like ours. But it didn't matter. The damage had already been done. He noticed. "Are you ashamed of me?" he asked one afternoon, voice low after I pulled away from his kiss. Or are you ashamed of yourself? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't breathe anymore. That I was waking up every morning with knots in my stomach. That every look from Maya made my skin crawl with guilt. That every touch from him felt like it carried 1,000 questions I couldn't answer. I missed the girl I was before. Even if she was lonely. Even if she was invisible. Because this new version of me, she was breaking. And the worst part? I still wasn't ready to let him go. It happened on a night that should have been just another quiet evening. Maya and I were curled up on the couch, the TV flickering with something neither of us were really watching. The house was silent except for the hum of the AC and the occasional clink of her spoon against a bowl of ice cream. We were almost okay. Or maybe I just wanted it to feel that way. Like if I acted normal enough, she wouldn't sense the war zone behind my ribs. Then her phone buzzed dead. Battery gone. Can I use yours to call Trevor? She asked, already reaching for mine on the coffee table. And I froze. I should have said no. I should have made up anything. But my mouth, it didn't work. And by the time I moved, her fingers were already tapping across the screen. She didn't even need to open anything. It was just there, the message lighting up the lock screen. Bold, bare, unforgiving. Tonight. Same place. I need you. And the world just stopped. I watched her read it. I watched her blink. And I swear I saw something in her break right then, like a crack slicing through stained glass. Something beautiful and old and sacred just shattered. She turned to me, her face pale, her voice barely above a whisper. Is this from my dad? I couldn't lie. Not anymore. Not with everything unraveling between us. So I said nothing. Nothing. And that silence. It screamed louder than any confession ever could. She stood up. The bowl crashed to the floor. And then came the screaming. You're disgusting. You're sick. He's my father. How long has this been going on? How long? I try to speak, to explain, to beg. But there's no language for the kind of betrayal I'd committed. No words that could soften the blow of that kind of wound. Then he walked in. Mr. Callahan. Like fate had timed it. He saw our faces. The broken glass. The truth seeping into the room like smoke. Maya, he said, stepping toward her, hands open like he could still fix it. Just listen. But she didn't. She screamed. She shoved him back like he was fire. Don't touch me. Don't come near me. And that's when it truly fell apart. Mrs. Callahan came running, her voice sharp, demanding to know what was going on. And Maya, God, Maya, spat the truth like poison. Dad's been sleeping with Isabel. The room went silent. silent in that suffocating, unnatural way. Like the air had been sucked out and nothing was allowed to move. Mrs. Callahan didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked at him. A long, piercing stare that felt like it lasted hours. Then she turned to me. And it was the coldest gaze I've ever known. "Get out," she said. "Now." I stood there frozen, heart thudding so hard it made my vision blur. But my legs moved. Somehow, they moved. I left without my shoes, without my phone, without anything but the clothes I wore and the weight of what I'd done clinging to me like a second skin. And as I walked down that long, winding driveway, past the gate, past the hedges, into the night, I could still hear Maya, sobbing, screaming, the sound of a family imploding. And all I could think over and over was this. The moment I saw the look on Maya's face, I knew I had just broken something I could never fix. I woke up the next morning on a motel pillow that smelled like bleach and strangers. My eyes felt swollen shut. My throat raw. There was a dull ache at the base of my skull and this unbearable quiet inside my chest. He hadn't called. Not once. No text. No explanation. Not even a goodbye. And honestly, I don't know what hurt more, losing Maya or realizing he was never going to fight for me. The receptionist slid a paper bag across the counter when I checked out. Said a man had dropped it off earlier. Inside was my phone, a folded sweater, and $200 in cash. That was it. No note. No message. Just enough to disappear quietly. And so I did. I moved into a one-bedroom, sublet downtown. It smelled like old books and loneliness. The walls were thin, the neighbors loud, and for the first time in my life, I was completely alone. I didn't go back to school that semester. I told my professors I was sick, which wasn't a lie. I just didn't tell them the sickness wasn't in my body. It was in my soul. Days blurred together. Nights were worse. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying it all. The moment in the kitchen when he touched my wrist. The way Maya's voice cracked when she screamed. The sound of her sobs after the truth fell out. And then, one night, I opened my laptop, found a therapist, and sent a message. Just a single line. I think I ruined everything. Her name was Michelle. Middle-aged. Calm voice. Eyes that never judged me, even when I couldn't look at her. The first time I told her what happened, I couldn't stop shaking. I kept apologizing over and over like I could somehow undo it with guilt. But she didn't interrupt. She didn't shame me. She just asked, "When did you stop recognizing yourself?" And that question. God, it broke me open. Because I didn't know. Maybe it started when I stayed too long in that last relationship, convincing myself I deserved the bare minimum. Maybe it started when I began silencing myself just to keep the peace. Or maybe it started that day in the garden when Mr. Callahan handed me a glass of lemonade and I mistook his attention for affection. All I knew was, somewhere along the way, I stopped being Isabel. The girl who painted for joy, who stayed up late reading poetry, who believed in kindness even when life didn't return the favor. I lost her. And I didn't just lose Maya. I didn't just lose him. I lost who I was pretending to be, and had to find who I really am. Therapy wasn't magic. It didn't erase the past. But it gave me a mirror, and for the first time, I didn't flinch when I looked into it. I started writing again. Journaling. Painting. Volunteering at a local shelter on weekends. Little by little, I stitched pieces of myself back together. Not perfectly, but honestly, I stopped checking my phone for his name. I stopped dreaming about second chances, because what I needed was a first chance with myself. And that kind of healing doesn't come in grand gestures or romantic endings. It comes in choosing to stay alive one quiet day at a time. 2 years. That's how long it had been since I left that house, that life, that version of me behind. And I thought I'd buried it. Really, I did. All the chaos, the guilt, the heat of it all. I thought it was sealed in a box somewhere at the bottom of my memory, labeled never open again. But memory is funny. It doesn't always wait for your permission. I was at a business conference in Chicago. It was one of those high-rise hotels with cold lighting, too much cologne, and plastic name tags that never stick straight. I was there for work, representing a nonprofit I joined as their new program director. Something I'd earned. Something that had nothing to do with who I used to be. I remember walking into the ballroom. The buzz of voices, the clinking of cocktail glasses, a string quartet humming in the background. And then, there he was, across the room, standing alone near the window. Mr. Callahan. Or James, as I'd once whispered in the dark when no one was listening. He looked older. Not in a bad way. Just softer. Grayer around the temples. Thinner, maybe. Like life had taken little bites out of him in my absence. But his eyes, those unreadable gray-blue eyes, hadn't changed. He spotted me before I could turn away. And, just like that, time folded in on itself. I wasn't 24 anymore. And he wasn't the man who made my world tilt. We were just two people in a room full of strangers, holding the weight of a history we'd never really said goodbye to. He didn't move toward me. Didn't raise a hand. Didn't smile, not really. But his eyes, they softened. And I nodded. Just once. A quiet acknowledgement of everything we were and everything we'd never be again. He nodded too. No anger. No regret. Just that shared moment of knowing. And then, I turned around. My heels echoed on the marble floor. The noise of the crowd swallowed me up again. And I walked out, not with heartbreak, but with peace. Because some stories don't end with a kiss. Some don't need closure wrapped in apology or forgiveness. Some just end with a quiet understanding. And a promise to never forget the part of you that once needed what they gave. Even if what they gave was never truly yours to keep. Have you ever loved someone you weren't supposed to? That kind of love that sneaks in quietly, pulls you out of yourself, and leaves you standing on the edge of everything you thought you knew? Would you risk it all, your friendships, your family, your own sense of who you are, for just one moment of truth? Even if that moment meant losing everything else? Because I did. And it cost me more than I ever imagined. But maybe, somewhere in that wreckage, there's a lesson. A chance to understand what it means to be human, flawed, vulnerable, desperate to be seen. If my story speaks to you, if you felt the pull of something forbidden or the ache of regret, I want to hear from you. Comment below with your thoughts, your secrets, your own confessions. Let's hold space for the messy, complicated parts of love that no one talks about. And if you want to hear more stories that dive deep, where others only skim the surface, subscribe to Cheating Confession Diary. Because sometimes, the truth is the hardest story to tell. And it's the one we all need to hear.